The listening lamp flickers to life, illuminating the space between worlds. Here, science whispers to spirit, and reality bends to imagination. Curl up in the cosmic glow as we unveil the extraordinary hidden within the ordinary. The Color of Music, a short story written by Rob Corrigan, narrated by Sarah Davidson.
The night air hummed with a low E-flat, the steady patter of rain against the windshield, a soft percussion accompanying the symphony of the road. Gabriel's fingers tapped out a silent melody on the steering wheel, his mind still echoing with the evening's rehearsal. The wipers kept time, sweeping away curtains of water in a metronomic rhythm. A flash of white light shattered the darkness. Bright headlights, a piercing A-sharp that cut through the gentle harmonies of the night. Gabriel's heart leapt into his throat, a discordant chord of panic. He wrenched the wheel, tires screaming against wet asphalt. The world tilted. Metal groaned and glass shattered in a cacophony of breaking notes. Then, silence. A terrible, hollow silence that swallowed everything. Miles away, Maya Reyes bolted upright in her bed, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. The remnants of a dream clung to her consciousness, a swirling vortex of impossible colors and haunting melodies. She blinked rapidly, trying to clear her vision of the lingering hues that shouldn't exist. As her breathing steadied, Maya became aware of an unsettling stillness in the air. It was as if the world had suddenly been muted, the usual nocturnal symphony replaced by an eerie quiet. She glanced at her bedside clock. 2:17 a.m. With trembling hands, Maya reached for her sketch pad, always kept close for moments like these. Her synesthesia often led to vivid dreams, but this was different. The colors she'd seen were unlike anything in her experience. Richer, deeper, somehow more real than reality itself. As she sketched the fading hues, her phone buzzed on the nightstand, startling her. Maya's stomach knotted as she saw the caller ID, Aunt Sarah. Her father's sister never called, especially not in the middle of the night. Hello? Maya's voice was hesitant, bracing for bad news. Maya, I'm so sorry to wake you. Aunt Sarah's voice was strained, tinged with a sorrow that manifested as deep blue ripples in Maya's perception. It's about your father. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Maya gripped the phone tighter, her knuckles white. What happened? There was an accident, Sarah said, her voice bleeding into a somber indigo. Gabriel, he didn't make it. The words landed like a punch to the chest. Maya's breath caught. The colors of the room, normally so vivid, smeared into one another, fading to a watery gray. She didn't hear the rest of what Sarah said. Something about arrangements, something about coming home. By the time she hung up, the reality was still a shadow creeping toward her, just beyond reach. But it was there, waiting. Her father was gone, and with him, the constant weight of his expectations. No more silent judgment behind his proud eyes, no more arguments that cut to the bone. The last time they'd spoken, his voice had been sharp, dismissive, calling her pursuit of art a waste of talent. You're wasting your talent, Maya. Music is in your blood, whether you like it or not. But now, in the silence, Maya couldn't help but wonder if it had been something else beneath his words. Fear. Fear that the one thing they'd shared, music, was slipping away, taking her with it. She had stormed out, vowing never to return. And now, Maya's gaze fell on the sketch she had been working on. The swirls of otherworldly colors seemed to pulse faintly, as if alive. With a sudden, inexplicable certainty, she knew these impossible hues were somehow connected to her father. As the first light of dawn began to seep through her windows, Maya made a decision. She would return home, face the memories and unresolved tensions. There were questions that needed answers, a complicated relationship to untangle. With a heavy heart, Maya began to pack, the usual vibrant colors of her world now muted and subdued. The music of her childhood, once a source of both joy and pain, echoed silently in her mind as she prepared for a journey she never wanted to take. The day ahead loomed, a canvas of uncertainty painted in shades of grief, regret, and a glimmer of something else, a mystery hidden in the notes of an unfinished symphony. Maya's car crunched over the gravel driveway. She put it in park and stared at the familiar two-story house, now worn and overgrown. It felt smaller, like everything had shrunk in her absence. She closed her eyes, remembering the last time she'd been here. The shouting match with her father, his words sharp and dismissive. "You're throwing away your gift, Maya. Music is who you are." Her own voice, raw with emotion. "You don't know who I am at all." The slam of the door as she'd stormed out, vowing never to return. And yet, here she was. Maya took a deep breath and stepped out of the car. The key was still hidden under the mat, just as it had always been. It felt small and cold in her hand, a weight far beyond its size. The lock turned with a click that echoed in the stillness. As she stepped inside, the silence enveloped her like a thick blanket. Dust motes danced in the sunbeams streaming through the windows, creating delicate patterns of muted gold in her synesthetic vision. The scent of her father's cologne lingered in the air, unexpectedly causing her throat to tighten. Maya moved into the living room, her eyes drawn to the mantel. Family photos lined its surface, but it was the recent one of her, taken when she wasn't looking, smiling off camera. She hadn't known he still kept track of her life. The grand piano dominated the room, sheet music still open on its stand, as if waiting for the next session. Maya approached it cautiously, her hand hovering over the keys. She pulled back at the last moment, afraid of the memories and emotions a single note might evoke. In the kitchen, an unwashed coffee mug sat in the sink, a poignant sign of interrupted routine. The calendar on the wall caught her eye. Her birthday was circled in red. Another unexpected revelation that her father had still kept track of important dates. Maya felt a twinge of guilt, quickly followed by a flare of resentment. Why couldn't he have shown this care when it mattered? She made her way upstairs, each step creaking a soft yellow note. Her old bedroom was largely unchanged, a time capsule of her youth. Posters of composers shared wall space with her own teenage artwork. On the desk, she found a box filled with childhood drawings, carefully preserved. Maya ran her fingers over the faded crayon lines, remembering how she used to try to capture the colors of the music she heard. The bathroom held its own memories. It was here, at age 7, that she'd first tried to explain to her father how she saw sounds. "The water from the faucet is blue, Dad. Can't you see it?" His initial dismissal had hurt, though years later he'd become fascinated by her synesthesia, peppering her with questions she didn't know how to answer. Finally, Maya stood before the closed door of her father's study. She hesitated, her hand on the doorknob. This room held the strongest memories, both good and bad. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open. The study was a perfect encapsulation of her father, creativity and discipline intertwined. Shelves lined with music theory books and original compositions. A metronome on the desk, still and silent. And there, placed prominently in the center, was a composition she'd never seen before. The title caught her eye immediately: The Color of Music. Curiosity piqued, Maya sat at the desk and examined the score. The notation system was unlike anything she'd seen before, with strange symbols and color codes in the margins. Notes scribbled on the side mentioned synesthesia, and Maya's heart began to race. Before she could stop herself, Maya moved to the small keyboard in the corner of the study. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a moment before she began to play the first few bars of the composition. As the notes filled the air, something strange happened. Colors seemed to shift and pulse, not just in her mind, but in the room. Maya's heart raced. What was this? Had her father found a way to make music visible? It was beautiful, overwhelming, and utterly foreign. Maya stopped abruptly as she reached the end of the written section. The colors faded, leaving her disoriented and breathless. What was this piece? How had her father created something that seemed to bring her internal experience of music into the external world? She sat in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. A whirlwind of emotions surged through her: curiosity about the nature of the composition, anger at yet another unfinished project left for her to deal with, and maybe, just maybe, a small, growing sense of connection to her father's final work. As the shock wore off, Maya looked around the study with new eyes. The unfinished composition seemed to hum with potential, a mystery waiting to be unraveled. Despite her initial reluctance, she felt drawn to it, sensing that within its notes lay answers to questions she hadn't even known to ask. With a mix of determination and trepidation, Maya made her decision. She would stay, at least long enough to investigate this last piece of her father's legacy. There was a need for closure, yes, but also a budding desire to understand what he had been trying to create. As she began to clean up the study, preparing for the task ahead, Maya found herself humming a melody from the composition. The air shimmered faintly with color, barely perceptible, but undeniably there. She paused, a chill running down her spine as she realized the magnitude of what she might be undertaking. This was more than just an unfinished symphony. It was a doorway to something greater, a bridge between her father's world and her own. And Maya, despite her reservations, was about to step through it. Maya's eyes fluttered open, greeted by the familiar glow-in-the-dark stars on her childhood bedroom ceiling. For a moment, disorientation gripped her, followed by a wave of panic as the events of the past day came rushing back. Her father was gone, and she was back in a house she'd sworn never to return to. With a heavy sigh, she dragged herself out of bed and made her way to the kitchen. The house felt different in the morning light, less oppressive, but filled with ghosts of memories. As she prepared coffee, her hand hesitated over the mugs. Almost unconsciously, she reached for her father's favorite, a chipped, well-worn cup with musical notes dancing around its rim. Using it felt like a small act of connection, a tiny bridge across the chasm of their estrangement. Upstairs, Maya dressed for the funeral, selecting a simple black dress. As she slipped it on, she noticed how the somber color seemed to dampen her synesthetic perceptions, muting the usual vibrant hues that accompanied every sound. It felt fitting, a visual representation of the gray cloud of grief that hung over everything. Her Aunt Sarah's call came just as Maya was about to leave. "We were thinking," Sarah's voice crackled through the phone, painting faint static in Maya's vision. "Perhaps you could play something at the service. Your father would have—" "I don't think that's a good idea," Maya cut her off, a familiar tension creeping into her voice. The thought of performing at her father's funeral, of being the dutiful musical daughter one last time, made her stomach churn. The church was crowded. Maya slipped into a back pew, feeling out of place among strangers praising a man she barely recognized from the eulogies. So different from the critical father she remembered. As a recording of one of Gabriel's famous symphonies began to play, Maya closed her eyes. The music painted swirls of color in her mind, beautiful and complex. For the first time since arriving, she felt a genuine connection to her father, understanding him through his art in a way she never could in life. Before she knew what she was doing, Maya found herself moving towards the piano at the front of the church. Whispers rippled through the congregation as she sat down, her fingers hovering over the keys. Taking a deep breath, she began to play the opening bars of "The Color of Music." The effect was immediate and startling. As her fingers danced over the keys, colors began to bloom in her vision, not just in her mind, but in the air around her. Hues she had no names for swirled and pulsed with the music, visible only to her but somehow affecting the entire congregation. Murmurs of appreciation turned to gasps of awe as the unusual melody filled the church. Maya lost herself in the music, forgetting for a moment where she was and why. But all too soon, she reached the end of what her father had written. The music cut off abruptly, the colors fading like mist in sunlight. In the silence that followed, Maya became acutely aware of every eye in the church fixed upon her. Applause broke out, tentative at first, then building to a thunderous crescendo. As Maya made her way back to her seat, she was stopped by person after person, all asking about the unfamiliar piece. It was something my father was working on," she explained haltingly, unsure how to describe what she had just experienced. After the service, as the crowd began to disperse, Dr. James Chen, her father's longtime friend and colleague, approached her. His eyes were kind, tinged with a sadness that painted soft blue hues in Maya's perception. "Maya," he said softly, "that was beautiful. Your father, he would have been so proud." Maya felt a reflexive surge of disbelief. "Proud? Dr. Chen, you knew him. Nothing I did was ever good enough." Dr. Chen shook his head, a small, sad smile on his face. "Maya, your father was many things, but he was never good at expressing his feelings. He was immensely proud of you, even if he couldn't show it. He talked about you all the time, you know. Your talent, your independence, your unique way of seeing the world." Maya stood there, stunned. Could it be true? All this time, had she missed it? The colors around her wavered, bending and twisting into new shapes, reshaping what she thought she knew. Her father's face, his voice, the sharpness of his criticism, all of it seemed different now, as though she were finally seeing him through his own notes. "That piece you played," Dr. Chen continued, "he was working on it right up until, well, he called it his most important work. I think, in a way, it was his attempt to bridge the gap between you two." As Maya drove back to her father's house, she felt as though she was seeing everything through new eyes. The study, which had seemed so oppressive yesterday, now beckoned with the promise of undiscovered secrets. That evening, Maya found herself once again poring over "The Color of Music." She noticed details in the notation she had missed before, subtle markings that seemed to correspond to the colors she had seen. As she hummed a few bars softly to herself, faint hues shimmered in the air. Maya leaned back in her father's chair, her mind whirling. Today, she had glimpsed a side of her father she had never known. Passionate, innovative, and perhaps, in his own flawed way, loving. Whatever this project was, it had the potential to change everything she thought she knew about music, about her father, about herself. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Maya felt a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. She stood at the threshold of something monumental, a journey into the unknown that began with a simple, unfinished melody. Whatever lay ahead, she knew her life would never be the same. Maya woke early the next morning, her mind still buzzing from the revelations of the funeral. The house felt different now, less a monument to past conflicts and more a repository of mysteries waiting to be unraveled. She made her way to her father's study, cup of coffee in hand, determined to delve deeper into the color of music. Maya sat at the desk and examined the score. The notation system was unlike anything she'd seen before. Strange symbols, colors marking the margins. Her heart raced as she found a small USB drive taped to the back of the final page. She inserted it into the computer, and Gabriel's tired, familiar face filled the screen. "Maya," he began, "if you're watching this, then I never got to finish what I started. The color of music was my way of understanding you, seeing the world through your eyes. I've spent so long trying to teach you, but I should have been learning from you. I hope this piece shows you what I couldn't say." Maya felt tears welling up as her father explained the project, a revolutionary approach to musical notation that incorporated visual elements to capture the experience of synesthesia. He talked about the challenges he'd faced, the breakthroughs he'd had, and his regret that he'd never shared this work with her while he was alive. "I need you to finish this, Maya," Gabriel said, leaning closer to the camera. "You're the only one who can. Your synesthesia, your artistic talent, they're not a distraction from music, as I foolishly believed. They're the key to unlocking its true potential. I see that now, and I'm sorry it took me so long to understand." As the video ended, Maya sat in stunned silence. The colors of her father's voice lingered in the air, mixing with the hues of her own turbulent emotions. She turned back to the composition with new eyes, seeing now how her father had attempted to notate not just notes, but colors and shapes as well. Determined to understand, Maya moved to the piano. As she began to play, she focused not just on the sound, but on the colors and textures each note produced in her mind. To her amazement, she found she could follow her father's visual notations, producing sounds and color combinations she'd never experienced before. Hours slipped by as Maya lost herself in the music. She experimented with different interpretations of her father's notations, each attempt bringing new insights. Sometimes, she could almost feel her father's presence, guiding her hands, helping her see the connections between sound and color. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the study, Maya realized she'd made significant progress in deciphering her father's work. But more than that, she felt she'd begun to understand him in a way she never had before. Through this composition, she was seeing the world as he had tried to see it, complex, interconnected, full of hidden harmonies. Exhausted but exhilarated, Maya finally stepped away from the piano. Her mind was awash with new ideas, new possibilities. She knew that this was just the beginning of her journey into the color of music, but for the first time, she felt truly excited about where it might lead. As she prepared for bed, Maya's thoughts drifted to her childhood, to the early days of discovering her synesthesia. She remembered moments of confusion, of feeling different, but also moments of wonder and beauty. Tomorrow, she decided, she would dig deeper into those memories, seeking connections between her past experiences and her father's work. Maya fell asleep with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. In her dreams, music and color swirled together, forming bridges between past and present, between herself and her father. She was on a path now, one that promised not just artistic discovery, but personal reconciliation as well. As the night deepened, the house seemed to settle around her, no longer a place of painful memories, but a cocoon nurturing transformation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new insights. But for now, Maya rested, cradled in the harmonies of her newfound understanding. Maya woke to the soft glow of morning light filtering through her childhood bedroom window. The events of the past few days swirled in her mind, a mixture of grief, discovery, and tentative hope. She made her way to her father's study, drawn to the piano that now seemed less an instrument of conflict and more a bridge to understanding. Her fingers brushed the keys, and a cascade of notes filled the air, each one blooming with color in her mind's eye. The vividness startled her. Had her synesthesia always been this intense? As the last note faded, Maya found herself swept into a memory she hadn't revisited in years. She was 7 years old, fidgeting in an uncomfortable dress at her father's symphony debut. The music started, and young Maya gasped as the concert hall exploded into color. Swirls of deep blue mingled with bursts of bright yellow, creating patterns she'd never seen before. Overwhelmed, she tugged at her father's sleeve, trying to explain the visual cacophony. "Dad, can't you see it? The music, it's everywhere." Present-day Maya watched her father's face in the memory, noting for the first time the mix of concern and fascination in his eyes. He hadn't dismissed her outright, as she'd always believed. There had been a spark of curiosity there, a desire to understand. Shaking off the memory, Maya turned her attention to the color of music score. She began to play, attempting to incorporate the vivid colors from her childhood experience into her father's notation system. As she worked, the music took on new dimensions, harmonies shifting and blending in ways that felt both familiar and entirely new. Another memory surfaced, sharp and clear. Maya, at 15, struggling with a difficult passage in preparation for a recital. Her father stood over her, his face stern. "Again, Maya, you're not feeling the music. You're just playing notes." "I am feeling it," she had snapped back. "I see it, Dad. Every note has a color, a texture. Why can't you understand that?" "Music isn't about colors, Maya. It's about precision, about control," her father had said, his voice harsh, dismissive. Maya had stormed off, leaving the room in silence. But now, looking back, she saw something she hadn't noticed before. A flicker in his eyes, something small and fragile. Not anger, not disappointment. Fear. A fear she didn't understand then but did now. It wasn't that he rejected her visions. He didn't know how to fit into them. Back at the piano, Maya found herself translating that tension into music. She created a section that represented their conflict, technical perfection clashing with emotive color. Then, slowly, she wove the two approaches together, creating a harmony out of their discord. As she played, another memory emerged. Her first year of art school, her debut show featuring paintings inspired by her synesthesia. She'd sent an invitation to her father, never expecting him to come. Yet there he was, looking out of place among the bohemian art crowd, but undeniably present. "I don't understand it," he'd said, gesturing to a canvas swirling with the colors of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. "But I can hear it somehow. It's beautiful, Maya." It was the first genuine compliment he'd given her art, and she'd clung to it for years. Now, Maya added a new section to the composition, blending classical structures with more abstract visual elements. She began to see how the color of music was her father's attempt to meet her halfway, to bridge the gap between their worlds. One final memory surfaced as Maya neared the end of her session. A phone call, just weeks before her father's death. His voice had been warm, excited even. "Maya, I'm working on something new, something different. I'd love your input on it." She'd brushed him off, assuming it was another attempt to lure her back to classical music. "Dad, I'm busy with my own work. You know I don't do that anymore." I know. But this is, well, it's hard to explain. Just think about it, okay?" Now, Maya realized with a pang of regret. He'd been reaching out, trying to connect through what would become the color of music. She poured this realization into the final section of the composition, crafting a poignant, reconciliatory passage that incorporated elements from all their interactions over the years. As the last notes faded, Maya sat back, emotionally drained but oddly at peace. She played through the expanded composition from the beginning, experiencing a flood of emotions and colors. For the first time, she felt she was seeing their relationship from both perspectives. Her frustration and hurt, yes, but also her father's genuine, if clumsy, attempts to understand and connect with her. The complexity of their relationship struck her anew. There had been pain and misunderstanding, but underlying it all was love and a shared passion for music, even if they'd expressed it differently. Maya realized that in completing the color of music, she wasn't just finishing her father's work, she was continuing a conversation they'd been having all their lives. As twilight fell, casting long shadows across the study, Maya remained at the piano. She felt closer to her father than she had in years, connected through the music they now shared. There was still much to do, both with the composition and her own healing, but for the first time, the path ahead felt full of possibility rather than pain. Maya closed the piano lid gently, her mind already turning to the next steps in her journey. She was determined to see this project through, not just for the sake of musical innovation, but as a way to honor her father and the complex, beautiful relationship they'd shared. As she left the study, the colors of the day's discoveries lingered in the air, a promise of further revelations to come. Maya sat at the piano, her fingers hovering over the keys as she stared at the complex passage before her. The color of music had been challenging from the start, but this section seemed almost impossible. Her father's color notations contradicted everything she knew about traditional harmony, and she couldn't quite grasp how to bring the visual and auditory elements together. As she struggled with the music, Maya felt an echo of the frustration she'd experienced so often with her father. A memory surfaced, sharp and painful, their last big argument before she left for art school. "Music is your gift, Maya," her father had insisted, his voice tight with anger. "You're throwing away years of training, years of potential." "It's not my gift, Dad," she had shouted back. "It's yours. I have my own path to follow." The words had hung between them, a chasm neither knew how to bridge. Maya shook off the memory and turned back to the composition, determined to solve this musical puzzle. She tried approaching it from a purely theoretical standpoint, applying every rule of composition she'd learned over the years. The result was technically correct but lifeless, devoid of the vibrant colors her father had envisioned. Next, she attempted to focus solely on the color notations, but the music lost all structure, becoming a chaotic jumble of sound and hue. With each failed attempt, Maya's frustration grew. Was she really the right person for this? Maybe she had been away from music for too long. Maybe her father had been wrong to entrust her with this task. Defeated, Maya stepped away from the piano. She wandered through the house, her eyes falling on the artifacts of her father's life. In the living room, a stack of old photo albums caught her attention. She pulled one out, flipping through pages of faded photographs. There she was, barely 5 years old, sitting on her father's lap at the piano. Both were laughing, caught in a moment of pure joy. Another showed her father beaming proudly at her first recital. Maya felt a lump form in her throat. When had things become so complicated between them? As she turned a page, an envelope slipped out and fell to the floor. Maya picked it up, recognizing her father's handwriting. It was a letter, never sent, addressed to her. With trembling hands, she unfolded the paper and began to read. Her father's words were filled with pride, love, and a deep regret for his inability to express these feelings. He wrote of his admiration for her artistic talent, his struggle to understand her unique way of seeing the world, and his fear that he was losing her. Maya's vision blurred with tears. She had never known, never even suspected, the depth of her father's emotions. As she refolded the letter, she felt something shift inside her, a new perspective taking root. She returned to the piano with renewed determination. Looking at the challenging passage again, Maya suddenly saw it differently. The dissonance between color and sound wasn't a problem to be solved, but a representation of their relationship, complex, sometimes conflicting, but with an underlying harmony. Taking a deep breath, Maya began to play. This time, she didn't try to reconcile the colors and sounds, but allowed them to coexist, to intertwine in all their complexity. The music that emerged was unlike anything she had ever heard or seen before. Colors swirled in her vision, sometimes clashing, sometimes blending, creating a visual symphony that matched the auditory one. As she played, Maya felt something change. The colors grew more vibrant, almost overwhelming. Maya blinked, trying to adjust to the sudden intensity. It was as though her senses had expanded beyond control, and the familiar colors of her world were now shifting and morphing with every sound. The change was exhilarating and terrifying. Maya continued working, losing track of time as she immersed herself in the composition. She began to notice musical patterns in the paintings on the walls, translating brushstrokes into melodies. The boundary between sight and sound was blurring, opening up new avenues of artistic expression she had never imagined. As evening fell, Maya revisited the memory of her argument with her father. Now, she saw it not as a battle between opposing forces, but as a passionate exchange between two people who cared deeply but struggled to understand each other. She recognized the love and concern underlying her father's words, and for the first time, she felt she could forgive both him and herself for the misunderstandings of the past. Maya incorporated these new insights into the color of music, adding sections that embraced both harmony and dissonance. The composition was taking on a life of its own, feeling less like something she was creating and more like something she was uncovering. In a strange way, she felt as if she and her father were collaborating, bridging the gap between them through music. As night settled in, Maya played through the newly completed section one last time. The music filled the room, colors dancing in the air around her. She felt a profound sense of connection to her father, as if, through this composition, they were finally speaking the same language. Exhausted but deeply satisfied, Maya prepared for bed. As she moved through the quiet house, she noticed that her altered perceptions lingered. The soft rustle of sheets created a faint shimmer of silver in her vision. The ticking of the bedside clock painted tiny dots of green with each second. Maya closed her eyes, but the gentle symphony of sight and sound continued behind her eyelids. As she drifted off to sleep, she felt as if she was floating in a sea of music and color, more connected than ever to her father's final gift to her, a new way of experiencing the world. The morning light filtered through the study window, illuminating the scattered sheets of the color of music spread across the piano. Maya sat motionless, staring at the composition that had consumed her life for weeks. Despite her recent breakthroughs, a growing sense of unease had taken root in her mind. As she reached out to touch the keys, a discordant jumble of notes and colors flashed through her mind, causing her to recoil. The intensified synesthesia that had seemed like a gift now felt overwhelming, every sound in the house creating a cacophony of color that she couldn't escape. Maya closed the piano lid with a soft thud, the action painting a dull brown streak in her vision. She paced the room, her father's presence seeming to loom from every corner. Awards, old concert posters, and faded photographs all served as reminders of Gabriel Reyes' towering legacy in the music world. "What am I doing?" Maya muttered, a ripple of green in her vision. "I'm not a composer." The weight of her father's expectations hung heavy, but she pushed the doubt aside. Maya's gaze fell on her half-unpacked suitcase in the corner. It would be so easy to pack up, to return to her life and her art, leaving the color of music as an unfinished dream. She took a step towards it, then another. As she reached for the suitcase, her elbow knocked against a stack of books on her father's desk, sending them tumbling to the floor. Amidst the fallen volumes, a small, leather-bound journal caught her eye. She had never seen it before. Maya picked up the journal, her father's cramped handwriting filling the pages. She skimmed through the technical notes, synesthesia, harmonic color scales, but it was the personal reflections that stopped her. "I've spent so many years pushing Maya toward music, never understanding that she was already inside it, just differently. She's always been a part of something I couldn't see, and it's taken me too long to realize that her art, her way of hearing the world, could be the missing key. Maybe this project will show her I finally understand." Tears blurred Maya's vision, the words on the page dissolving into smears of blue and gray. She had spent so long believing her father could never understand or appreciate her art, and yet here was evidence that he had been trying, in his own way, to reach out to her. As Maya continued reading, she found detailed notes about synesthesia, color theory, and the neuroscience of perception. Her father had immersed himself in these subjects, all in an attempt to see the world through her eyes. The color of music wasn't just a composition, it was a love letter, an apology, and a celebration of her unique way of experiencing the world. With newfound determination, Maya returned to the piano. She placed her father's journal next to the score, feeling as though they were working together now, collaborating across the boundary of life and death. As she began to play, the colors that had felt overwhelming before now seemed to coalesce into something meaningful. She could see the structure her father had been trying to create, the framework designed to support and enhance her synesthetic perceptions. Maya played for hours, the colors and sounds blending in ways that felt both new and deeply familiar. With each note, she felt closer to her father, as if they were finally speaking the same language. The sections that had once confused her began to make sense, not just musically, but emotionally. She saw his effort now, his desire to create something that spoke to her. Tears pricked at her eyes as she realized how much she had misunderstood him, and how much he had misunderstood her. Yet here, in this music, they were meeting in the middle, both trying to see the world through the other's eyes. As the last notes faded, Maya sat back, exhausted, but exhilarated. She realized that her doubts hadn't disappeared entirely, but they had transformed. The fear of failing her father had been replaced by a desire to honor his final work, to complete this journey they had begun together. Maya glanced at the suitcase in the corner, now forgotten. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, more moments of doubt and difficulty. But she also knew, with a certainty that resonated through her entire being, that she would see this through to the end. As twilight fell, Maya closed the piano and her father's journal, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. She had come close to giving up, but instead had found a deeper connection to her father and to herself. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, Maya allowed herself to bask in the gentle afterglow of colors that lingered in the air, a silent symphony of understanding and reconciliation. The early morning light had barely begun to seep through the curtains when Maya awoke, her mind already buzzing with anticipation. She had dreamt of swirling colors and haunting melodies, and even in the quiet of dawn, the world around her seemed to pulse with hidden music. She made her way to the study, clutching a cup of coffee that painted warm, amber waves in her vision with each sip. The piano stood waiting, sheets of "The Color of Music" spread across its surface like an unfinished puzzle. Maya took a deep breath, allowing the calm of the morning to settle over her. As she sat at the piano, her fingers hovering over the keys, Maya closed her eyes and let her mind wander over everything she had learned, about the composition, about her father, about herself. When she opened them again, she saw the music with new clarity. The complex color notations her father had created suddenly made sense. They weren't just an attempt to translate sound into color. They were a roadmap of emotion, memory, and shared experience. With trembling hands, Maya began to play. The first notes filled the air, and with them came a burst of color unlike anything Maya had ever seen. Deep, resonant blues swirled with vibrant greens, creating patterns that seemed to defy the laws of physics. As she continued, the colors grew more intense, more impossible. Maya gasped as she realized what she was seeing. These weren't just representations of sound. They were glimpses into a world beyond normal perception. Her father had somehow found a way to notate colors that existed outside the visible spectrum, hues that could only be experienced through this unique fusion of music and synesthesia. As she played on, the music seemed to take on a life of its own. Each passage transported Maya through a moment in her shared history with her father. A lilting melody in soft pastels brought her back to childhood piano lessons, her small hands guided by her father's larger ones. A dramatic crescendo in bold reds and golds recalled heated arguments and clashing wills. But it was the quieter moments that truly took Maya's breath away. A gentle harmony in shimmering silvers revealed the pride in her father's eyes as he watched her first art show, a pride she had been too angry to see at the time. A complex series of chords in deep, midnight blues spoke of long nights her father had spent trying to understand her unique perception of the world. Tears streamed down Maya's face as she played, the salt water creating tiny prisms that fractured the impossible colors into even more intricate patterns. She was seeing her entire relationship with her father laid bare in music and color. Every joy, every pain, every misunderstanding, and every moment of love. As she neared the end of the composition, Maya felt as though she was approaching some great truth. The music swelled, the colors intensified, and suddenly, she understood. This piece, this magnificent, impossible creation, was her father's attempt to see the world through her eyes. Gabriel Reyes, the great composer who had always insisted on precision and structure in music, had created a piece that embraced the fluid, synesthetic way his daughter experienced sound. He had pushed beyond the boundaries of traditional composition, beyond even what he understood, all in an effort to connect with her. The realization hit Maya with such force that her hands faltered on the keys. The music stuttered, the colors flickered, and for a moment, she was afraid she would lose this profound connection. But then, almost of their own accord, her fingers found the notes again, and the symphony of impossible colors resumed. As she played the final bars, Maya felt a presence in the room, as if her father was there with her, seeing through her eyes at last. The last note hung in the air, accompanied by a burst of color so beautiful and indescribable that Maya wept openly. When the echoes finally faded, Maya sat in silence, her hands resting lightly on the keys. The world around her seemed forever changed. Every surface shimmered with residual color, every sound created ripples in the air. She understood now that the color of music was more than just a composition. It was a new way of experiencing reality, a bridge between her world and her father's. Maya stood slowly, her legs shaky. She walked to the window and looked out at the dawn-lit world. A bird's song painted delicate arabesques in the air. The rustle of leaves created a soft green haze, and beneath it all, she could almost hear the deep, resonant tones of her father's love. With a soft smile, Maya turned back to the piano. There was still work to be done, refinements to be made, but she knew now, with unshakable certainty, that she would complete her father's vision. More than that, she would expand upon it, adding her own understanding to his foundation. As the sun rose fully, bathing the room in golden light, Maya sat down once more at the piano. Her fingers found the keys, and as she began to play, the world around her erupted into a symphony of color and sound, a testament to the power of music to bridge divides, heal wounds, and reveal the extraordinary beauty hidden in the ordinary world. The days blurred together as Maya immersed herself completely in the color of music. Her world had become a swirling vortex of sound and color, each informing the other in an endless feedback loop of creativity. She worked tirelessly, sometimes forgetting to eat or sleep, driven by an almost manic energy to complete her father's vision. Every note she added to the composition seemed to unlock a new facet of understanding. As she refined a delicate passage of shimmering violets and silvers, Maya found herself recalling a long-forgotten memory of her father comforting her after a nightmare, his strong hands gentle as he stroked her hair. The memory, once painful in its reminder of what she'd lost, now filled her with warmth. As she crafted a bold, brassy section full of vibrant oranges and reds, Maya realized she was channeling her father's passion and drive, qualities she had once resented, but now recognized as part of her own artistic fire. Each measure brought new insights, healing old wounds and bridging the gap between father and daughter. In quiet moments, when she stepped away from the piano to rest her aching fingers, Maya could almost feel her father's presence. She imagined him standing beside her, nodding in approval, his eyes shining with pride and love. These moments, though bittersweet, fueled her determination to see the project through to its conclusion. As the composition neared completion, Maya felt a growing sense of anticipation mixed with trepidation. This wasn't just her father's final work. It had become a fusion of both their artistic visions, a testament to their complex relationship and shared passion for music. The thought of sharing it with others was both exhilarating and terrifying. After much deliberation, Maya decided that the first performance should be an intimate affair. She wanted to share this deeply personal work with those who had known and understood her father best. With trembling hands, she penned invitations to a select group of her father's closest friends and colleagues. You are cordially invited to a private performance of Gabriel Reyes's final composition, The Color of Music, completed by his daughter, Maya Reyes. As she wrote, Maya realized how much her perspective had changed. Once, she would have balked at the idea of being introduced as Gabriel Reyes' daughter. Now, she felt a surge of pride at the connection, at the legacy she was continuing and transforming. The day before the performance, Maya ran through the entire composition one last time. As the final notes faded, leaving a lingering palette of soft golds and deep purples in the air, she felt a profound sense of completion. Tears streamed down her face, but for the first time in years, they were tears of joy and release, rather than pain or regret. That night, as she lay in bed, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She thought of the angry, hurt young woman who had first returned to this house, and marveled at how far she had come. Through the music, she had not only reconnected with her father, but had also rediscovered a part of herself she thought she had lost forever. The morning of the performance dawned clear and bright. Maya moved through the house in a state of calm anticipation, preparing the space for her guests. She positioned the piano in the center of the living room, surrounding it with her father's awards and photographs. On an easel next to the piano, she placed one of her own paintings, a swirling abstract that she now realized was her visual interpretation of her father's music. As the appointed hour approached, Maya changed into a simple black dress, the same one she had worn to her father's funeral. But this time, instead of dampening her perceptions, the dress seemed to heighten them, turning her into a conduit for the music and colors she was about to share. The doorbell rang, and Maya took a deep breath. This was it, the moment when her father's final work, their shared creation, would be unveiled to the world. As she moved to answer the door, Maya felt a surge of love and gratitude for her father, for the gift he had given her, and for the journey that had brought her home in more ways than one. With a smile on her face and music in her heart, Maya opened the door, ready to share the symphony of colors that had changed her life. Maya's fingers hovered over the keys, her heart pounding in anticipation. The living room was filled with her father's colleagues and friends, their faces a mixture of curiosity and reverence. Taking a deep breath, she began to play. As the first notes of The Color of Music filled the air, Maya felt the familiar rush of colors swirling around her. But this time, something was different. The colors seemed more vibrant, more alive than ever before. They pulsed and swirled, filling the room with impossible hues that even she had never seen before. Lost in the music, Maya's fingers danced across the keys with a life of their own. The composition flowed through her, each note a burst of color and emotion. As she reached the crescendo of the piece, the colors intensified, shimmering and shifting in ways that defied explanation. Suddenly, amidst the swirling symphony of color and sound, Maya saw him. Her father, Gabriel, standing beside the piano, watching her with eyes full of wonder and pride. The shock nearly caused her fingers to falter, but the music urged her on. "Dad?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the music. "Is it really you?" Gabriel smiled, a warm, gentle expression she had rarely seen in life. "It's me, Maya. You've done it. You've brought the colors to life." As Maya continued to play, she found she could speak to him, her fingers never missing a note. "I didn't think I could do it. I thought I'd failed you." "Failed me?" Gabriel's voice was filled with emotion. "Maya, you've exceeded everything I ever dreamed. I'm so proud of you. I always have been. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you before." Tears streamed down Maya's face as she played, the colors around them pulsing with each sob. "I wish we'd had more time. I wish I'd understood." Gabriel moved closer, and Maya felt the warmth of his presence. "We have this moment now, thanks to you. You've bridged the gap between our worlds with your music, with your incredible gift." As the piece neared its end, Maya felt an overwhelming sense of love and connection. The colors swirled around them, creating a cocoon of light and sound. In this ethereal space, Maya and Gabriel embraced, years of misunderstanding and pain melting away in the warmth of their reconciliation. "I love you, Maya," Gabriel said, his voice beginning to fade as the final notes approached. "Never forget how proud I am of you. Your art, your music, your colors, they're more beautiful than I ever imagined." With tears in her eyes, Maya played the final chord. The audience roared with appreciation. As the sound reverberated through the room, Gabriel's image began to dissolve into the fading colors. "Dad!" Maya cried out, reaching for him. Suddenly, Maya found herself on the floor beside the piano, gasping for breath. The room was in chaos, guests crowding around her with concerned faces. Someone was calling for water, another suggesting they call for medical help. "Maya, are you all right?" It was her father's old friend, Dr. Chen, kneeling beside her with a worried expression. Maya blinked, disoriented by the abrupt transition. The vibrant, impossible colors were gone, replaced by the normal hues of the living room. But the warmth of her father's embrace, the sound of his voice filled with pride and love, these remained, as real and vivid as the keys of the piano beside her. "I'm fine," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "I'm more than fine." As she allowed Dr. Chen to help her to her feet, Maya's eyes swept the room. The guests were murmuring amongst themselves, their faces a mixture of concern and awe. They were unaware of the profound experience she had just had, of the veil between worlds that had been briefly lifted by the power of music and love. But Maya knew. Like the colors she saw in music, invisible to others but undeniably real to her, the encounter with her father was a truth that resonated in every fiber of her being. As she steadied herself against the piano, her fingers brushed the keys, and a soft chord rang out, accompanied by a faint shimmer of color that only she could see. Maya smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace and understanding wash over her. The color of music had done more than just bridge the gap between her and her father. It had shown her the endless possibilities that existed when one could see, hear, and feel beyond the ordinary world. And in that revelation, Maya found not just resolution, but a new beginning.
Thank you for illuminating your imagination with the listening lamp. If our tale has sparked a light in your mind, we invite you to keep that flame burning. Subscribe to our podcast and join us again as we continue to explore the vast cosmos of human experience. Until next time, may your inner light guide you through the mysteries that await.